I learned that song like 2 days before I performed it live. Oh my gosh, and I about puked every time I performed on the show. It was just...
She made millions laugh with puppets, but behind the spotlight, Darci Lynne was silently unraveling. America first met her as a bright-eyed 12-year-old girl holding a bunny puppet named Petunia on the world's biggest talent stage. Her charm was irresistible, her timing flawless, and her voice shockingly powerful. So much so that Judge Mel B slammed the golden buzzer, catapulting her to instant stardom. But while the confetti rained down and headlines declared her the new face of ventriloquism, something far more fragile was happening behind that confident smile. From the moment the cameras stopped rolling, Darci was thrust into a whirlwind she wasn't ready for. The fame came fast, the expectations even faster, and beneath the laughter, she was carrying a weight no one saw coming. As fans celebrated her flawless performances and viral videos flooded the internet, few realized that the same girl who brought puppets to life was beginning to lose pieces of herself in the process. The schedule became relentless, the spotlight never dimmed, and the pressure to keep smiling became unbearable. Insiders would later reveal that Darci often cried backstage before performances, overwhelmed by the expectations placed on her shoulders. In interviews, she hinted at it, saying she sometimes just wanted to be a kid again. But those quiet admissions barely scratched the surface of what she was really going through. Because what unfolded over the next few years wasn't just the story of a talented young star trying to find her voice. It was a slow unraveling of a girl fighting to hold onto her identity while the world demanded perfection. And by the time she finally spoke out, the truth was more heartbreaking than anyone imagined. Because Darci Lynne wasn't just battling stage fright or teenage nerves. She was hiding something deeper, something far more painful than anyone expected. And what happened next would leave even her biggest fans shocked. Darci Lynne's jaw-dropping win on America's Got Talent was supposed to be the beginning of a dream come true, a fairy tale moment where a young girl conquers the world with nothing but a puppet and a voice that defied her age. At just 12 years old, she didn't just win the hearts of the judges, she won over an entire nation. Her audition video racked up millions of views within days, and her name was suddenly trending everywhere from YouTube to People magazine. The narrative was clear. Darci was the wholesome, homespun prodigy bringing ventriloquism back into the mainstream with a modern twist. She was invited to perform on Ellen, booked into a national tour, and hailed as a once-in-a-generation entertainer. But behind the glowing headlines and standing ovations, something was already unraveling. In private, Darci was beginning to feel the pressure, crushing expectations, constant travel, long hours of rehearsals, and little to no time to simply be a teenager. She once admitted in a 2018 interview that she felt out of place when she went back to school because no one could relate to her anymore. The girl who once loved performing was now performing out of obligation. Her puppets became a symbol of success, but also a reminder of how far removed her life had become from anything resembling normal. Friends drifted, childhood milestones were missed, and instead of sleepovers and slumber parties, Darci was navigating interviews, contracts, and constant media attention. And while her fans cheered her every move, no one noticed the toll it was taking, until she quietly began to retreat. Less content, fewer public appearances, and a noticeable shift in tone started to emerge. The very talent that made her famous was now anchoring her to a version of herself she was no longer sure she could sustain. And yet, what the world didn't know at the time was that this was just the beginning. Because what came next would force Darci to confront the one thing she'd never learned how to handle: the emotional cost of being a star too young, too fast. When Darci Lynne took the stage for her America's Got Talent audition in 2017, no one could have predicted the cultural impact that would follow. A soft-spoken Oklahoma girl with a rabbit puppet and a nervous giggle, Darci transformed the moment she opened her mouth. Her performance stunned the judges, not just for her flawless ventriloquism, but for the sheer vocal strength she projected without ever moving her lips. Mel B's golden buzzer came down like lightning, launching her into the national spotlight and cementing her as a fan favorite overnight. Week after week, she delivered show-stopping routines, seamlessly switching voices, characters, and tones with uncanny professionalism. She wasn't just a child star, she was a phenomenon. By the time she won the season finale, she had become one of the most talked about AGT contestants in the show's history. Tours followed, sponsorships poured in, and Darci quickly found herself performing to sold-out crowds across the country. But what fans saw, a smiling girl making puppets come alive, was only the surface of a much more complex story. In backstage interviews, Darci often spoke about how quickly her life had changed, how she was suddenly surrounded by managers, agents, and non-stop media attention. While other 13-year-olds were worrying about middle school dances, she was flying to Hollywood for press junkets. She tried to keep smiling, but there were early signs of the emotional toll. In one interview, she hesitated before admitting, "Sometimes I get scared, I'll mess up and let people down." Her mother would later reveal that Darci struggled with intense stage fright that often turned into full-blown panic attacks before major performances. Still, she pushed through, believing that staying strong was part of the job. But behind that strength was a child shouldering the emotional weight of an industry that rarely makes room for vulnerability. Darci had climbed the mountain, but she was already beginning to feel the cracks beneath her feet. And as her star rose higher, so did the pressure, and the cost of keeping up the illusion of perfection was just beginning to show. As the curtain kept rising, so did the pressure behind it. For Darci Lynne, the very thing that made her a household name, her ability to appear fearless and fun on stage, was quickly becoming a double-edged sword. In private moments, the weight of her rapid success began manifesting in ways no fan could have imagined. Behind the puppets and polished performances, Darci was battling what she would later describe as intense anxiety that gripped her before nearly every show. In multiple interviews, she admitted to experiencing moments where she felt like she couldn't breathe, and confessed to breaking down in tears behind the scenes just minutes before stepping into the spotlight. According to those close to her, Darci developed a fear of disappointing not just the judges or her fans, but everyone around her who now depended on her brand, her image, her success. The stakes felt higher than ever, and for a teenage girl still learning who she was, the emotional toll was devastating. While her social media stayed bright and bubbly, the reality was darker. Sleepless nights, self-doubt, and an inner voice questioning if she was losing herself to the character she was expected to play. She became, in her own words, trapped in a persona, the girl who could never show weakness, who always had to smile, who always had to deliver. Her family noticed the change. Her mom once shared in a podcast that Darci, though incredibly grateful, began to struggle with being on all the time, often retreating into silence when the cameras were off. What the audience saw as applause, she began to feel as pressure. What looked like a dream career was becoming a daily emotional battle. And the longer she stayed silent about it, the more isolated she became. It was no longer just stage fright. It was a full-blown identity crisis happening in real time, in front of millions. The fame that once felt like a fairy tale now came with an invisible weight, and Darci was quietly slipping under it. But the real turning point came when her health began to falter. And that's when the silence became more than emotional. It became physical and deeply alarming. By the time fans began noticing Darci Lynne's sudden absence from the spotlight in late 2021, whispers were already circulating. Something wasn't right. The girl who once toured non-stop, posted regularly, and appeared on every major talk show had gone unusually quiet. Concert dates were quietly postponed. Her social media presence thinned out, and her YouTube uploads, once a vibrant platform for skits and music, slowed to a trickle. But no official explanation came, just silence. Then, months later, in a cryptic livestream, Darci admitted she had been taking time to focus on her health, without offering further details. That one vague statement sent fans into a spiral of speculation. Rumors ranged from vocal cord issues to chronic fatigue, emotional burnout, even recovery from an undisclosed surgery. Some fans claimed to spot a hospital bracelet in a now-deleted photo, while others pointed to drastic shifts in her appearance. Weight fluctuations, tired eyes, a subdued energy. Industry insiders whispered that she had been quietly undergoing treatment for something serious, possibly physical and emotional in nature. While nothing was ever confirmed publicly, her team's sudden tightening of media access only added to the mystery. In one of her few 2022 interviews, Darci simply said, "I needed to take care of myself, mind and body," before swiftly changing the topic. For a girl whose entire brand was built on joy and light-hearted humor, this sudden withdrawal was more than just a pause. It was a distress signal. Some close to the family hinted that the cumulative stress, overexertion, and mental health toll had finally caught up with her. Others suggested she'd been warned by doctors to step away completely or risk long-term damage. Whatever the truth, one thing was clear. This wasn't a publicity break, it was survival. Darci's retreat wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. She had gone from America's darling to a young woman hiding in plain sight, fighting a battle no one could see. And when she finally returned, everything about her, from her voice to her mission, had changed. But what shocked fans even more wasn't just that she came back, it was who she came back as. When Darci Lynne finally resurfaced in early 2023, fans were quick to notice something different, not just in her tone, but in her entire presentation. The once inseparable puppets, who had been her creative lifeline since childhood, were no longer center stage. Instead, Darci began appearing solo, her hands empty, her performances stripped back, raw, and unmistakably personal. For the first time, she introduced herself not as a ventriloquist, but as a singer-songwriter. A shift that might have seemed subtle to casual followers felt seismic to longtime fans. Her Instagram bio changed. Her YouTube banner featured moody visuals instead of playful puppets. And in a bold post she wrote, "It's scary starting over, but sometimes that's how you grow." The reaction was mixed. Some fans cheered her artistic freedom, while others expressed disappointment, accusing her of abandoning the very act that made her famous. But behind the scenes, sources close to Darci revealed that this wasn't rebellion, it was recovery. After years of feeling trapped inside a character, she was finally ready to show the world who she really was. In interviews, she confessed that while she still loved ventriloquism, she needed to explore who she was without it. "I used to hide behind the puppets," she said in one candid clip. "Now, I want to be heard as myself." The move wasn't just symbolic, it was therapeutic. Her new songs, layered with vulnerable lyrics about identity, fear, and healing, hinted at an emotional evolution few had expected. Even her fashion changed, trading in bright performance dresses for more grounded, expressive styles. She no longer smiled for every camera. She no longer explained herself. This was Darci without the filter, without the script, an artist trying to reclaim a narrative that had been written for her since she was 12. And while her reinvention confused some, it liberated her. She was no longer the girl with the bunny puppet. She was a young woman rewriting her story, one stripped-down performance at a time. But just as it seemed she was finally stepping into the light, a second mystery began to take shape, one that would leave fans more confused than ever. Why did she start disappearing again? Just as Darci Lynne's fans began embracing her artistic rebirth, another unsettling silence began to unfold. This time in 2025, and this time with even fewer answers. After a year of intimate acoustic performances, personal songwriting, and mental health advocacy, Darci once again began pulling back from the public eye. Tour announcements vanished. New music releases were delayed indefinitely. Her once regular posts on social media became cryptic and infrequent, marked by vague captions like "starting over," "learning to breathe again." And not everything needs to be explained. With no official statement and no public interviews to clarify her absence, speculation surged across fan forums and entertainment blogs. Was she burnt out again? Had she decided to leave the industry for good? Some followers theorized that she was attending college in secret, attempting to live a normal life far from the lens that had defined her adolescence. Others feared a relapse, either emotional or physical, as echoes of her past struggles crept back into view. A handful of anonymous tips even claimed she was working on a deeply personal documentary, though nothing materialized. More intriguing were the subtle signs buried in her few appearances. Interviews where she sidestepped questions about future plans, live streams where she looked emotionally drained, and song snippets that hinted at betrayal, loss, and spiritual searching. One particularly haunting lyric posted in a now-deleted story read, "The stage remembers, but I've forgotten who I was before it." The Darci that fans once knew, bright, bubbly, always ready with a puppet punchline, seemed worlds away from the reflective, almost distant young woman glimpsed in fleeting moments. No official hiatus was declared, but for those who had followed her since her AGT triumph, the silence spoke louder than any press release. It left audiences asking not where she was performing next, but whether she was okay at all. And in that uncertainty, the heartbreak deepened. Because this time, it wasn't just about stepping back from puppets or pop culture. It felt like Darci Lynne, the person, was slowly slipping away again, and nobody could say for sure why. Darci Lynne's journey isn't just a story of a talented ventriloquist who won America's heart. It's a stark, sobering reminder of what happens when fame arrives too early, and the world forgets that behind every standing ovation is a human being still learning how to breathe. Her rise was meteoric, her skill undeniable. But beneath the polished performances and polished puppets was a young girl forced to grow up under a microscope. From her record-breaking AGT win to her sold-out tours and sudden silences, Darci's path has never been linear. It's been riddled with hidden tears, quiet disappearances, and emotional battles most fans never saw coming. And yet, through every transformation, the mental health struggles, the mysterious illnesses, the artistic pivots, one thing has remained constant: her bravery. Because while the world celebrated her for making puppets talk, they missed the deeper courage it took for her to one day put them down and speak for herself. Darci's decision to step away, to reinvent, and to retreat when necessary isn't a sign of weakness. It's a testament to someone reclaiming control over a life that was never entirely hers to begin with. Today, her story resonates far beyond the stage, offering a mirror to anyone who's ever felt crushed by expectation or afraid to break away from what others demand them to be. Whether she returns to the spotlight or continues healing in the quiet, Darci Lynne has already done something far more impactful than any final bow. She's shown that behind every smile, there can be struggle, and that it's okay to walk away to save yourself. So before you scroll away, take a second to ask yourself, how many other stars are silently suffering behind the scenes? And what would happen if we applauded their honesty as much as their talent? If this story moved you, make sure to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe, because sometimes the most powerful performances happen when the curtain closes.